was a bit of a rocky time. I really struggled for a number of reasons. I was ready to try something different. I'm really grateful that my company allows me to do that and makes me feel safe to do that. Part of learning is failing. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. How are you all? It is so nice to be sat down and chatting to the camera again in one of these sort of chatty life experience share all style videos. I really do enjoy doing these but don't get a lot of time as a working woman in London to sit down and do them, so it is nice when I do get a chance to sit down and plan my video and share my life learnings with you all. Yeah, as you can probably tell from the title of this video, I'm going to be weighing up whether a grad scheme is actually worth it. I guess I kind of wanted to just sit down and talk to you guys about grad schemes, what they are, positives, negatives. I did work for a year before starting my grad scheme, so I do have experience both in a normal everyday sort of entry-level role and on a graduate program, and I wanted to just talk about my experience for any of you that might be thinking, do I want to do a grad scheme, is it worth it? Or if you're in the position I was in when you're getting rejections and you can't get onto a grad scheme and you know you need to work out, is that actually what I want to do? Don't be too disheartened because there are other routes into the grad scheme or there are other routes into the working world that aren't necessarily grad schemes, and it's just about finding what fits for you. And for me, it was actually really good that I didn't get onto a grad scheme to start with, I think, because having that year in a normal job gave me the skills and prepared me in a way to get onto a grad scheme. Now, for a little bit of context, I graduated 2 years ago into the pandemic. It was a bit of a rocky time and I really struggled with getting onto a graduate scheme. I'd have done a video on this elsewhere, so go check that out on my channel, but I probably wasn't ready. It was a really bad time with COVID. A lot of companies were cancelling their schemes, or like there was a lot of uncertainty, people weren't really hiring. It was a really difficult time to get a job. And yeah, with all that uncertainty, there just weren't as many places available, and it was also like super competitive. Grad schemes are really competitive to get onto, so yeah, I really struggled for a number of reasons. So instead I decided to take up a normal working entry-level role, not necessarily for a graduate but definitely for someone with little work experience. You needed a degree, but it wasn't a specific scheme tailored to your learning. It was more just, this is an entry-level role and you can climb from there. Whereas a graduate scheme, for those of you that don't know, is more of a structured learning course. I think they're a UK thing. I get a lot of people in the comments saying they don't know what a graduate scheme is or their country doesn't have them, but yeah, they're basically, I think they can be anything from like 1 year to 3, 4, 5 years, depending on what sector you're in, what job you're in, if you're sitting professional qualifications. But it's basically a program that is specifically for a university graduate. It has like set learnings, courses, certifications to sit, things like that. And the idea is that you come in with no knowledge, little to no work experience, you're straight from uni, and that company will invest the time and money to train you up, to give you the exams, qualifications and skills that you need to do well in that industry and beyond. So yeah, it does have that more learning and development focus than maybe some entry-level jobs have. That is not to say that you do not learn and grow from an entry-level job, because I've had one and I did. Just that graduate schemes maybe have a more tailored program that is specifically designed to teach you on the back of university and requires no previous experience. So yes, coming out of the pandemic, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, struggled with getting onto a graduate scheme, so instead took up an entry-level position with a small presentation design agency that I really loved, and I learned so much during my time there. I loved the people, I loved the work, the culture, and after my year there, I kind of felt like I was ready to try something different, try a different industry, and for me that was business, and I didn't really know anything about business. I obviously did an English degree, so it wasn't exactly a direct route for me. So I knew I wanted to be on a graduate scheme instead of an entry-level role because I wanted to be taught and trained in that field, having no prior knowledge. So that's when I started applying to business schemes. At this point I was quite focused on business, whereas before when I was getting my rejections I was kind of applying for a bit of everything here, there and everywhere, like business, consultancy, communications, journalism, publishing. I just didn't know, but at this point I think it definitely helped me out knowing what specific type of grad scheme I wanted to get into, and that probably came through in my interviews, in my applications. I was a lot more passionate and a lot more driven and focused. That said, I didn't specifically know what area of business I wanted to go in, and that's why I think a grad scheme would be a good fit for me, because, well, specifically the scheme I'm on is rotational. It is 2 years long. I get to try 2 different parts of the business and learn lots about different types of departments, functions, skills, roles within the business world. So I have just finished my first year on my business graduate scheme, and that was in commercial, learning about buying and negotiation, commercial know-how and awareness, data skills, Excel spreadsheets. My little English brain is like, I've never had to look at a spreadsheet or numbers throughout my whole degree, and now you're making me do this, what? But yes, just finished my first year doing that, and now I'm on to my second year, and I asked to be placed in a more communications focused role, so I'm now in a communications department, because I wanted to see if I could do something that's maybe a little bit more aligned to the degree I did and the skills I have, having tried something that was more out of my comfort zone in my first year. So I think the way I want to set this up is starting with maybe the positives of a grad scheme, and I was going to say the negatives of a grad scheme, but not necessarily the negatives, but the positives of not being on a grad scheme as well. And obviously, just to preface this video, this is my personal experience. We will all have different experiences in the working world on different graduate schemes, so don't come at me in the comments and be like, my grad scheme isn't like that. You know, I'm not trying to speak on behalf of everyone. I'm just talking about my personal experience in the hopes that it might help some of you. So first up, the positives of a grad scheme is that it's usually a fixed structure. It might be 1 year, 2 years, depending on the sector or the industry you're in, and whether you're doing professional qualifications as well. I think accountancy and finance tend to have longer schemes because they are training you up to sit actual exams and get a qualification at the end of it. But yeah, I really like the stability and security of knowing that my life is kind of mapped out for the next 2 years, and I have this safety or this time to just explore and fail and try again and just keep moving until I find something I like. And then when the 2 years is up, that's when I can start considering, is this industry for me? Is this role for me? What did I enjoy? What did I not enjoy? What do I want to pursue? But for now, these 2 years are just about exploring in my case, which is something I really found that I needed, because I didn't know what industry I wanted to go into or what career I wanted to go into other than business. And I'm really lucky to be at a company that values breadth of experience when you're young, because you have your whole life ahead of you to specialize and gain depth of experience once you really know what you want to do. But for now, for me, I need that breadth and I need that chance to explore, and I'm really grateful that my company allows me to do that and makes me feel safe to do that. And in the same breath, there are kind of no repercussions if I fail, or I'm always being told by managers, you should never be in a position where you get something wrong and it is monumentally destructive for the business. Like, no manager will let you be in that position where you could do something to make the entire business collapse. So your failing shouldn't really have a huge knock-on effect, and I like that encouragement to get things wrong, because you learn when you do get things wrong as well. And it's nice to know you're not going to be told off or reprimanded or, you know, written off as a bad colleague or a bad grad, and you know, they understand that you are learning, and part of learning is failing. Again, this is just my experience. If you're on a different type of grad scheme, for example an accountancy graduate scheme, then 9 times out of 10 you're probably going to know you want to go into accountancy. But in my case, a generic business scheme allows me that time to explore different options. That's also something to weigh up when you're looking at graduate schemes. Is it more flexible? Can I try different things? Is that what I'm looking for? Or is it a specific set role? Is it a scheme that's going to take me down a certain path? Obviously there are still options outside of that, but at that point, if you're committing to something for however many years, then you might want to have an idea that that's definitely what you want to go into, or something you're very passionate about. But obviously all these grad schemes come in different shapes and sizes, and it's just about finding the program that fits you. Next up, a grad scheme is usually tailored specifically for entry-level applicants that have no prior work experience or very minimal work experience. So if you haven't had a job beforehand and you are straight out of university and don't feel that you have the skills or the knowledge in the certain field you want to go into, it can be a really great opportunity to learn and grow and develop, as I've already touched on. Chances are they will have really good learning materials in place, like courses, certifications, weekends away to send you on, and e-learning online, and lots of other colleagues that can help train you up and are specifically trained to train you. And I think that can differ sometimes to an entry-level job, where they will obviously train you to do the job and you will still learn and grow and get promotions. But on a grad scheme specifically, it does have that development, growth, learning angle to it. So it kind of feels like you're still at university, because you will still be learning, and obviously in some instances you will be revising and sitting exams. In most cases, these qualifications and learning courses you'll be going on will be nationally, internationally recognized, which will make you more competitive if you do want to leave the company, or you even want to move into a different industry. Just the fact that you have demonstrated you can learn and grow and, you know, practice these new skills within a working environment is enough to show some other employers that you are employable and reliable. So yes, if you're looking for a learning opportunity, grad scheme is the place to be. Next up, if you're on a grad scheme, chances are you will be part of a larger cohort. So at my business, we have the business graduate scheme. I think there's also tech and finance. Before that, they had a specific commercial scheme, marketing. I think there are things like accountancy, consultancy schemes. So you might be part of a smaller scheme that sits within, you know, a wider cohort with lots of other schemes as well. So there are really great opportunities to make friends, to meet people, to socialize, to be around people who are in the same position as you, and you can bounce your experiences off one another and share your opinions and kind of help each other muddle through, which I really like. It's nice to go to people my age who are straight out of university and be like, I didn't understand any of that, did you get that? And it's just reassurance. Whereas I think in an entry-level role, it can often feel like you are the only young or younger person there, the only person fresh out of university. You can feel inexperienced and like everybody knows exactly what they're doing. But on a grad scheme, it's easy to look around and be like, look, we all don't know what we're doing, but it's fine because we're muddling through together. And the nice part about being in a cohort is that you can do things outside of work, like pubs and house parties. Do people still do that? I think, well, we definitely still do that. I don't know if other people do that, but it is like being at university still. And at my company, we actually have a graduate society and they put on events. So it is definitely still like being in societies and clubs and things at uni, which can be really helpful actually when you're moving to a city potentially that you've never lived in before, moving in with strangers or into existing house shares, or just kind of like uprooting your life and starting all over again. It's actually really nice to know you have the guaranteed chance to make friends and be with other people, and to stop yourself from feeling lonely actually. So yes, really good part of a grad scheme is being part of a cohort. Next up, I've kind of touched on this in the learning section, but grad schemes are usually viewed as quite prestigious in the UK and are recognised by other companies. And yes, it will definitely help you when applying for jobs or progressing afterwards. I think there are also really good progression routes from a grad scheme. Like, the point is they want to take you on and train you up as a blank slate so that you can ultimately get promoted and, you know, do higher level roles, and they want to retain your talent. So if you're looking for an opportunity to progress and get promoted and maybe more managerial roles or to have more responsibility, then a grad scheme could be really great. I mean, fair enough if you don't. And again, entry-level jobs that aren't graduate schemes can still give you this opportunity. So don't rule that out and think, you know, if I want to progress, I need to get on a graduate scheme. That is not the case, I don't think. Obviously, only speaking from my personal experience, but I guess sometimes people view graduate schemes as a bit of a fast track. So yeah, it can be a real big advantage having been on a grad scheme. And a lot of companies do kind of reward that loyalty of having started with that company from the start. They want to help you climb up. Next up, on grad schemes, I would say you're given a lot of responsibility, and I know this is a word that's kind of bandied around a lot, and sometimes it doesn't seem real, like when you sit on these talks or these inductions and they're like, yeah, you'll be given loads of responsibility from day one, and you're like, what? Like, I don't know anything, what responsibility are you giving me? But it kind of like builds up intensity, or again, at least in my case, they'll give you dribs and drabs until they feel like you are confident enough and have demonstrated your skills enough that they can trust you with the responsibility to manage your own projects, your own time, your own calls and things like that. So I think being given the responsibility and being treated like an adult is actually really great, but also with, again, the safety that they know you're a graduate too. But I never feel like I'm being handheld or babied in any way. Like, they accept that we're all very clever young people fresh out of university with lots of ideas, and our opinions are respected and our work is valued, which is really nice. I can't obviously speak on behalf of all companies, but at least in my experience on my graduate scheme, I'm given a lot of responsibility and my own projects to oversee, and I actually have the chance to ask for more responsibility or less, or that we can have very, very fluid conversations where I say, oh, I feel a bit out of my depth here, can you help me? Or actually, I'd like to be more responsible for XYZ, or can I take on this project? And you know, 9 times out of 10 the answer is going to be yes, because they like to see that I'm growing in confidence and developing and maturing across the course of the 2 years. Now I'd like to talk about maybe some of the downsides of a grad scheme and some of the benefits of maybe doing an entry-level job instead. As I've said, I do feel glad that I didn't get onto any of the grad schemes I first applied for, because I didn't know what I was doing, and having done an entry-level job and just experienced a bit of the real world first, it helped me realise what I did want to do and didn't want to do, and it gave me a little bit more time to think whilst also earning money, which was great. And I also feel like it gave me some real world skills or experience that gave me a little bit more of an edge when trying to get onto a graduate scheme, and it felt like the pressure was off as well, because I wasn't just trying to race to get the first thing I was offered. I had time to really tailor my applications, work out what I wanted to do, all with the security that I knew I already had a job anyway and was earning money, so if it didn't work out then I still had that to go back to. Whereas when I was at university, I kind of felt like if I don't get onto a graduate scheme, what am I going to do? Like, I didn't have anything else in the pipeline, and it was like, I'm just going to have to go home and live with my parents for a bit and not earn money, and that was kind of stressful. Yeah, so I think having that entry-level job first was a really good stepping stone for me. Okay, so my camera battery is about to die, so if this goes off and then I come back and it looks a bit darker and my background's changed and the camera angle's changed, I'm really sorry, but I need to go charge my battery because I do not have a spare one. Right, I'm back. Sorry, yes, where was I? So reasons why you might not want to apply for a grad scheme or might just go for an entry-level role instead. I mean, first and foremost, the kind of job or industry or company you want to go for might just not have a grad scheme, and it's better to go for the specific role or company you want than just going for a grad scheme for the sake of it. I would always recommend weighing your options up, but if you're really certain about what you want to do and you're passionate about it, then you should definitely follow that passion and don't just try to fit yourself into some kind of mold for the sake of it, for saying, oh, I got onto a grad scheme. Like, pursue what you're interested in instead, and a grad scheme isn't necessarily the right answer for every single job, and there is no one-size-fits-all approach for any graduate out there. Next up, I guess it kind of depends on the size of the company as well. Like, it's very common that bigger companies will offer graduate schemes, and you might think, actually, I want to be at a startup or a smaller business, or you might think that a bigger company kind of runs like a well-oiled machine and you just don't want to sort of go through that conveyor belt of graduates that they churn out, and that is fine too. You might get more freedom and more responsibility, or there might be better options to progress at a smaller company because it is smaller and there is less, I don't know, I don't want to say competition, but sort of fewer people to compete against, I suppose, than if you're going into a big company that's very hierarchical. You might not like that sort of structure, and that means you might prefer to go in at an entry-level role in a smaller company. Next up, you might be put off applying to a grad scheme if you've heard the horror stories about workload. And yes, unfortunately, I think some of these stories are very true. I'm very, very fortunate that we have a good work-life balance and culture at my company, but I have definitely heard the horror stories and seen them on the news that some companies really overwork their graduates or take advantage of their graduates. And it's really easy when you're young and want to impress to take on too many tasks or work too many hours because you want to get on quickly in your career. And you know, I think sometimes within that grad scheme environment it can foster that sort of toxic culture, and you're competing against everybody else and you see other grads working super late and taking on more projects, and then you feel like you need to do that too. And sometimes that hostile environment just isn't right, especially if you know you're not the type of person that is willing to do that. I personally like my work-life balance. I like to start at 9 and finish at 5, and my grad scheme allows me to do that, but some graduate schemes might not necessarily in the contract itself, but just by nature of the culture and the scheme and the way it's set up and the kind of people that get onto the graduate scheme. So yeah, I think workload is definitely one to be mindful of when thinking about graduate schemes and the type of company culture that is out there. And if you think that it might have that culture, then maybe it's not for you. Next up, I know I said that graduate schemes give you a large chance to grow and progress and learn, but you might find that progression slightly slow, or you might want to get straight into it. But obviously it's up to your manager, and it probably differs from person to person and job to job and scheme to scheme, and they might, you know, sort of feed you bits and dribs and drabs, and you might want to go a bit quicker and learn a bit more, but they're following a set structure that they know they have to teach you and a set scheme that is in place for all graduates. And maybe there might not be as much flexibility to change that if you are all learning at the same time and are expected to move at the same time. And that might be maybe one downside if you are in a big cohort as well, that they need to sort of keep you going at the same pace and might not necessarily have the time or chance to tailor it a bit more to you. Again, it varies though, and I can't speak on behalf of every scheme. This is just an idea that I'm throwing out there. Whereas in an entry-level role, you might be the only newbie in the team or one of a small handful of new hirees in the team. So your manager might actually have more time to like sort of keep an eye on you and your development and be able to tailor your learning, your growth, your tasks to you. I guess as well, like, you might actually have more responsibility being in an entry-level role than on a graduate scheme. I think sometimes you might have the illusion of responsibility by being on a grad scheme, when really it's true that if you do make mistakes there shouldn't be any really major repercussions, because that is the nature of the way the scheme is set up. Whereas I guess if you know things could really go wrong in an actual job, then that is more responsibility, because you know that you can't get things wrong and you need to really take ownership of what you're doing. So maybe if you do want more of a challenge or more ownership, then an entry-level role might be more up your street. The next point I want to make, I've kind of touched upon all the way through this video, but I guess on a grad scheme, your experience might be super variable. And I keep saying this, but it is because it's true. It might just depend on your manager, and even though there are 50 of us in my cohort, every single one of us will have a very, very different experience of the grad scheme depending on the line manager we have been allocated. Some of us have line managers that are really hands-on, really involved in our personal development and progression. They like to sit down and do weekly chats and catch-ups about the skills we're developing or the opportunities we'd like to have or the learnings we've been doing, like independent learning and also structured learning, and asking about our career progression and where we see ourselves going, and really wanting to pair us up with mentors or coaches and help us build our network. And other grads might have, you know, a line manager that just needs the extra hands in the team. They just treat them as they would any other member of the team, rather than like a graduate who is there to learn and focus on their own personal development as well as just doing the day-to-day job, and might just be given the tasks that people don't want to do, the admin tasks, the boring tasks, or just kind of being placed wherever there is a gap to do work, and it might not necessarily be in the benefit of that graduate or help further their career or progression or direct them towards where they want to go. So I guess, yes, that is one of the downsides maybe of a graduate scheme versus an entry-level role. It completely depends. But I get, again, with an entry-level role, your line manager also kind of determines your experience too. So a lot of these points kind of go for both. It's really hard to say like a grad scheme versus an entry-level job is any one thing, because it will always vary depending on the people you interact with, depending on the company you work for. Next up, if you're weighing up entry-level job versus graduate scheme, I would say you can still gain extremely valuable life skills from doing an entry-level job too. I definitely think I became more confident, a better speaker, a better presenter. I could manage my calls more, and I have more like client stakeholder facing conversations with less nerves and, I don't know, less rambly or hiccupy, is that even a word? Like, you know what I mean? Less fear of talking to people both inside my company and outside of the company. And I think that confidence I fostered at my entry-level job was really, really useful coming into my graduate scheme. So I'm actually really grateful that I could develop that skill that then lay great foundations for my grad scheme. So I think don't just assume you can only learn valuable skills from being in a grad scheme, because that is definitely not the case. I learned organisation and time management and responsibility and leadership and ownership and verbal and written communication and so many different skills. And also I trained up in specific softwares and gained qualifications from that, whether that's from actual courses I went on or LinkedIn learning or self-taught or by learning from the other people in my company. And this was in an entry-level job, so you don't necessarily need to be on a grad scheme to do these professional qualifications. There are definitely still opportunities to do that in an entry-level role. And I definitely consider looking into that when you're applying for a job, because it might specifically say, we will train you in coding, we will train you in Microsoft Office or Excel, or you know, you can pick these skills up in any working environment. Next up, I would say the downside of grad schemes is that they are very, very competitive. And I know this is kind of an upside as well, because it means it looks really great on your CV, but in the same breath, they're really difficult to get onto. And a lot of people on my grad scheme now are actually in the same boat as me, in that we graduated a few years ago and had jobs before getting onto the graduate scheme, which you might be thinking, hang on a second, this is a grad scheme tailored for graduates. But they can do that. They can offer you a place on a graduate scheme even if you've had a job before that. Some companies specify a certain number of years after graduating that you have to be within like a certain range to get onto the scheme, but there are some people on my scheme who have had multiple jobs before starting on their graduate scheme, or have even done other graduate schemes first. So yeah, like there's nothing to stop you fluidly transitioning between the two like I did. And I actually think because we all had prior work experience, that actually helped us get onto the grad scheme more, because we could show that we had the skills and the talent and the work ethic and the real world knowledge, I don't know, more so than a recent graduate might have. So I guess if you're worried about not getting straight onto a graduate scheme, you need to start looking at an entry-level role as something that is really valuable and can help you get there. And I mean, again, an entry-level role shouldn't just be seen as a stepping stone either, because if I'd found the career in the industry I wanted to go into with my first entry-level job, then I wouldn't have had the need for a graduate scheme. It just so happens that my first job wasn't necessarily where I saw my life headed in. But if it was, then it probably would have been the best place for me to stay, because I would have found what I liked and they could have helped me develop on that. And it would be silly then to leave if I'd found what I thought I loved. So not that I didn't love my first job, but you know what I mean. So that is everything I have to share with you guys today. I hope some of you have found this useful. Again, this is just my personal experience. I know you guys might have different experiences, and as I've said, share them in the comments below, because this is a space where I want to be able to help you guys to grow, and I want you to be able to help one another and make your important life decisions. In terms of the question, is a graduate scheme worth it? I guess there is no set answer. Like, any job, any scheme, any entry-level role, anything you do in life is worth it if you make it worth it. I know that sounds so cliche, but it is just about putting your all into what you do and getting the most out of it that you can. And again, it is down to the individual, so it is really up to you to sort of follow your passions, and it's all right to just, you know, take it each step at a time. You don't need to have a 5 to 10 year plan mapped out, because ultimately life comes and gets in the way, and you learn new things as you go, and you have to change that plan anyways. When you're this young and you're still learning and there's so much about the world that you just don't know, it's best to just acquire experiences and make decisions like as you've gained that experience, and have more up here to actually help you make your decisions. So I hope you found this useful. Let me know in the comments below if you've found a new job, or you're applying for jobs. Are you thinking about grad schemes or an entry-level job? I'd love to hear about your experiences. And thanks for watching, everybody. Goodbye.